Just a moment.
Yep.
We should be live now.
Okay. All right, guys, so we'll just do an official call to order here. We'll go ahead and start our working meeting. Thanks to everyone for coming out. We'll do our official roll call. So from the 1st Congressional District, Commissioner Tobias.
Present.
Awesome. And from the 2nd, Commissioner Anthony.
Present.
And from the 3rd, Commissioner McClellan.
Present.
Awesome. And I'm one of the commissioners from the 4th. Commissioner Rangel will be on with us a little bit later, as well as Commissioner Rand. From the 6th, Commissioner Prentice.
Present.
And Commissioner Bissonnette. I don't see him here yet. We'll see if he comes in a bit later. And from the 8th, Commissioner Phillips.
Present.
Okay. All right, guys, we'll go ahead and just kind of work through our agenda here. But the next role here that we have is the February 25th hearing recap. I know Melissa had a meeting to go to later on in the day, so we'll go ahead and push the COI information up too. But just wanted to get into the February 25th hearing, and if anybody had anything to bring up or any questions or any comments about it, feel free to go ahead and jump in. But I thought it was a really good hearing. It was you know, a breath of fresh air to sort of get a couple different takes from Chad, as well as with one of our Republican representatives as well. And so I think it really harkened to how much of a nonpartisan issue that this is that we're going into. And I feel like we got a couple of good pointers in terms of who we could reach out to and kind of going forward and sort of getting more information. But other than that, anybody else had anything with regards to our two speakers or with regards to the public testimony?
Yeah, I thought that Sessions made a very provocative case about how important transparency is than anything else that we could do. So I thought it was just a powerful presentation of how we need to proceed. And I like the fact that, you know, that he disclosed, you know, who he was politically, but at the same time, you know, stressed the importance of this committee doing their work in a transparent form.
Absolutely.
I'll just kind of second a little bit what Ruben said. My two takeaways from that were that we really probably should reach out to the county commissioners in some way to at least ask the questions and let them respond. And then also with transparency. And I think they're hungry to get some information out from us out into the grassroots people. I think the things that Sachin was saying that he'd like to see, we're really all in almost full agreement with the criteria. So I think it might make everybody feel a little better if we can push some information out.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I had those two just to kind of piggyback off of that, Anne-Marie, for the municipal clerks as well as the county clerks. And so I haven't yet heard from, I know that the next steps were going to be, they're going to send us some emails about some folks to reach out to. We can kind of touch base with Maddie and Jack and see if, you know, there have been any outreach in the future. So, yeah.
You know, I left that meeting wanting to know more about how the maps would proceed through a process. And it sounded like, you know, it would go through a legislative process, and the legislators had, you know, some ability to shut things down, and then it would go to the court. But, you know, we ran out of time, but I wanted to ask him, you know, at the end of the day, you know, what does the process for moving these maps forward look like? You know, in some of our earlier conversations, folks have said just do a good map, and maybe your map might be the one to, when the legislators come with their map, that there might be a comparative analysis. But I left there wanting to ask a question like, give us more about the path forward, you know, for these maps.
Yeah, and that, you know, that's a really good point. And I think, you know, a lot of that is yet to be determined, you know, depending on how our maps are received, and depending on some of the legal actions that may or may not occur after we submit our final product. Jack, feel free to jump in. I know we've had this discussion before, but if you have anything else to add upon that.
Well, I think that, well, two things. One, somebody had mentioned outreach to clerks and the like. I spoke with Sue Ertmer after the hearing and gave her everybody's thanks. I thought that she just embodied public service in a way that was really, at least for me personally, inspiring. Very much free from any partisan thought at all. Just good administrator of elections in her area. So I thanked her for that and for talking to you guys. And then also told her if she had any thoughts as to who we could contact or anything at all to reach out to me or Chris. And I gave Chair Ford's email address. With regard to the overall strategy, I think that the most important thing that the commission can focus on, frankly, is coming up with the most unimpeachable maps possible. And then it'll be up to whether through either grassroots organizations, the governor's office, once the product is done, to try to push the legislature on that, and maybe some advocacy from you guys. But at this point, the legislature is going to do what they're going to do. They're, I think, not very interested in this process. So that's okay. The most important thing you guys can do is come up with quality maps. And you're doing a great job by everyone's account so far, which of course not put any pen to paper, but we're ahead of the curve in the process. So that's all I've got to say about that.
Yeah. Any other comments regarding the 25th hearing that we had? I'll take that as a no. Okay, perfect, guys. All right. So our next topic that we have here is discussion of the communities of interest definition. And I know that there was a recent meeting that was had yesterday as well. So if you guys have any updates on that, feel free.
Sure, I'll share a little bit on that, and then Anne Marie, if you want to jump in with anything I might have missed. I know we had quite a few people on that meeting yesterday. It was actually really great. We chatted with representatives from a few of the grassroots organizations in the state. So the Fair Maps Coalition, League of Women Voters, the Wisconsin Democracy Campaign, and the Redistricting Foundation. I was trying to remember them all. And we talked about basically ways that they can help the overall work of the MAPS Commission, specifically around gathering the community maps so that we can identify communities of interest. So we talked about making sure that they get the training done, and then sharing that information out so that they're then training additional people, and then starting to figure out ways that we can get deeper into the communities, both thinking about technology limitations that people would have, limitations around gathering due to the pandemic, and making sure that we're really getting good data and representation from rural areas, from tribal communities, and from diverse groups in urban areas as well. We had set some dates around some of our goals, and this is where Anne Marie, if you want to jump in, I'm like searching for my notes while I'm talking.
Oh, well, I can kind of jump in with the dates and then like the specific asks of the group. We all had a little bit of marching orders. Timelines are really a concern. If I was remembering right, I told them I thought that we were wanting to get our communities of interest data collected by May 31st. So by the beginning of June, we would have data that could start to be crunched. And they thought that sounded a very short timeline for the amount of organization that needed to be done. And they requested that we ask Moon if it's possible, like, can we get some community interest data pulled together and then start using it, but knowing there's more data to come and we refresh that at a later date? Perfect.
Absolutely. Yeah, we had planned in the timeline to give multiple cycles of aggregation.
Okay, good.
So
So
what would that gathering look like, Anne Marie? As we're gathering the community of interest data, what would that approach to gathering that data look like?
well, yeah, and so this is good question, Ruben. And one of the things, Carlene Betcham, who runs the Fair Maps Coalition, which is at least 20 different organizations that are part of that, and it covers the entire state. She thought that maybe they could get 20 to 40 people pulled together, and if by the end of March we could have a big training session for districtor, but also the materials like this PowerPoint that we're talking about, like that will define definitions the way we all agree on, and really make it easy for these people to go out and schedule things into their community. They also need help in knowing what questions they should be asking the community before they start collecting the data. So Moon, I know that you've had that and your team has that pulled together. The challenge is that these grassroots organizations, most of the people that they will encounter probably know about gerrymandering and it's not news to them, but we're hoping that we'll be able to open up to a whole new group of people that really don't know about gerrymandering, and maybe they don't even need to know. You know, what they need to know is we are doing new districts and we want to know what they feel is a community of interest, because we want to not break them up when it comes time to assign them to a legislative group or to an assembly. So I think we can do that really simply and kind of avoid the whole discussion of gerrymandering to hit both groups.
I guess I asked that because for operationally kind of maybe direct it more so at Moon too, because we got 1,920 something cities, villages and towns, you know, here in the state, and 72 counties. And so how do you make that type of process operational? Because it is a big order.
One thing I'll just quickly mention is that if you want to be dividing the state into zones and then reaching out to partners to try to collect maps by zone, that's one approach that some other states are taking. In your case, with 8 congressional districts, you might let the districts be the zones. You know, that would kind of correspond to how you think about the commissioners as well. And then reach out to groups to try to make sure that the zones or the districts are keeping up with each other in terms of the number of map submissions. One thing we'll be able to provide you in basically real time is we'll be able to show you where maps are coming in, where in the state maps are coming in. So we'll be able to give you kind of real-time feedback that you can use to build up your outreach. The other thing I was going to ask is whether it makes sense to pass along to us contacts for the Fair Maps Coalition so that we can invite them directly to trainings, or whether it makes more sense to not.
You know what? I think it might make everybody's life easier if we set it up and then give it to Carlene and let her filter it through. I think a lot of this is going to be organic. It'd be nice to control it, but I think that it will grow, and that our networks out, like Liz Trevino said that she's got good contacts in Milwaukee and Racine with Block and other organizations that might not be part of the grassroots spread, you know, and we are working on trying to get into networks that we might be able to. We've got some contacts with the Latino communities across the state through what you sent out, Chris, but we need to initiate those. And then maybe the Hmong communities and some other communities that won't be easy to find, easy to contact. And how do we do that? And that's what Melissa was talking about. I think one of her challenges is that she was supposed to figure out what we could do through the libraries, which would, in a non-COVID time, local libraries would be a really good way to reach out. You know, there might be church groups that that are interested in doing it as well. So it's generating those networks is a current challenge.
Thank you.
So I think that that's,
Go for it, Emery. Yeah.
yeah, I think that that's kind of it. And, you know, we just needed to get back with them about the being able to provide all the materials they need. And Carlene's going to get busy on her end and start talking up our challenge to her community and get ready.
Yeah. So here was
one question for the Fair Maps Coalition might be to ask if they want one event page where all of their coalition groups can post maps, or if each group might be interested in their own page.
Yeah, Liz, I think that would be excellent.
Does it make sense? And I know we had floated this at least originally, Liz. Does it make sense to have an event page for the PMC actually that we can shoot out to folks, and then not just Fair Maps can submit via that link? Does that, I don't know the logistics on your end of things. So it's a PMC specific link that we can host publicly on the website, et cetera, et cetera. It filters through on your end as for anyone who wants to submit for the to the PMC specifically, not just those in the Fair Maps Coalition. Does that work on your end of things, and does that sound like an option, commissioners? I don't know. Just one idea.
I'll just say it's fairly nimble on our end. We can tag even one map with multiple tags. So a map could be tagged PMC, it could also be tagged Fair Maps Wisconsin. That's just, it helps us keep the data organized on the back end. And then maps don't have to be tagged at all. They can still be submitted through the submission portal without a tag. So it's quite flexible. But what's nice is that you get an organized review so that you can see everything that's come in with a particular tag. And for that, if you would like, we'd be happy to have a separate one for PMC and Fair Maps, or to even within Fair Maps to have separate ones for each of the member organizations. That's really pretty flexible.
I think my thought, yeah, that sounds great. I think my thought to explain it is just to make sure that folks who are not in Fair Maps or affiliated with it don't feel like they can't submit their maps using that link or something like that. So that's why I was thinking if PMC is the overarching group, but I'll let you all decide.
Chris.
I guess from my perspective, in terms of like transparency and outreach, I don't know if this has already been talked about, if this is what you're getting at, Maddie, but if whatever would make the maps that are submitted most accessible to the public, I think one thing we've heard from testimony is that it would be really good for everyone in the state who wants to see the maps that have been submitted that we're going to be using to inform our work, our public. And so it makes sense to have that on the commission website. If more people will see it, if it's also unique to the coalition partners and they have their own website portal too, and like, that's great. The more people that have access to it, I think the more transparent it will feel. Which, I mean, to the point of transparency, we're obviously not hiding anything, but I think transparency and like awareness are sort of connected if people aren't aware of this work. And so whatever makes it most public, I think would be the best.
Okay. Chris, can I?
Yeah, go for it out.
It seems to me you've heard a lot from the very beginning from community of interest that identify, if I'm using that term right, that identify themselves with natural resources. They have nothing to do with what I would think of as culture or ethnicity. They have to do with rivers and lakes mostly, watersheds. And I think as you move out through the state, that becomes more and more important. And as you portray yourselves, or as you hope to portray yourselves as not simply urban, you may want to identify or give access to groups who are concerned, as they said to us, with things like watersheds. I mean, they were explicit about that. It would be too bad to forget about that because they are organized both around particular watersheds and in statewide organizations that are protective of lakes and rivers and the like. I don't know all of them. It's not my world, but I don't know if you refer to them as natural resources or the environment or conservation or how they think of themselves. And I think those words tend to be loaded, actually. So that's a whole other category that has nothing to do with the kinds of things that I think are becoming sort of dominant in this conversation about communities of interest. They're not dominant in the state, generally around the state. They're not nearly often as powerful, for example, as natural resource protection types who take all kinds of political stripes.
Boom, can I ask a question before I leave to you? So from a building the maps perspective, will you create like an optimal map for the state and then put the layers on and then kind of do some variance analysis to see how close we get to that? Or what will be your mapping approach to putting the layers on to get to the final map? Just talking.
So our plan for the synthesis of the COIs is to give you commonly identified communities in a heat map format, where, for instance, you might have several different people, many different people giving a similar description, but with slightly different areas. And so to aggregate that, you'd say, these block groups are definitely part of this community, and these ones are kind of on the boundary. A heat map kind of gives you a sense that real communities are fuzzy edged, which I think is usually the case. And then with that, we plan to report to you in terms of the scale of the communities, namely their, based on their population, they might be good candidates for trying to keep whole at the congressional level, or something smaller might be a good candidate for trying to keep whole at the legislative level, at the House or Senate level. And so we'll give you an aggregated report of common themes, where they were located, and what their scale suggests in terms of at which level you might most prioritize their integrity.
But that's just developing the community of interest layer. But what about, some of the other layers,
Right,
like boundaries and things like that? I guess I was asking that from a macro perspective and building out the entire map beyond the communities of interest.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so how do the COIs interact with the rest of the process? So according to the timeline that we've sketched out, there will come a point when you'll start drafting possible maps using 2019 population data.
Okay.
And so that's fairly recent, and it's the best we have in advance of the new census data drop. And so as you build these draft maps that are balanced with respect to the most recent population numbers, we'll give you evaluation and feedback, including telling you how good of a job you're doing at preserving the COIs that were identified.
Okay.
And as part of that, we'll give you counter proposals. So we'll produce other kinds of maps you might want to consider because they, meet the criteria at least as well as the draft map. And then the hope is to iterate through a few cycles of that. You propose, we offer some counter proposals for your consideration.
I think she's locked up on us.
Yeah.
Yeah. But thank you.
That does
Yeah. Hey, Chris, I got to jump off, but thank you. Okay. Thank you all.
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah. Sorry, Moon, you broke up there for a little bit. Apologies.
Yeah, no, that's on my end.
No worries. No worries. It's the new way of Zoom, isn't it? So one of the questions
That's right.
that went to the group was, other than the religious, ethnic, cultural groups that we are looking into, are there any other groups that we should be targeting to get this data for COI? I guess it's just to the group or to anyone who wants to field it.
Chris, we were just chatting about school districts in the chat.
Yeah, I saw that.
I don't even know. It was more of a question, but other people have chimed in saying they feel like school districts could be COI. So I don't know if the COI committee has thought about that. Do we reach out to certain people that way? I don't know if that's useful or not.
Yes, school districts have been brought up in a few conversations I've had, specifically with some of those mid-sized cities that were split in half during the last redistricting. So Sheboygan is one of those, and I think there's a few others in the 6th district as well that are in that same boat. And school districts would be one way of thinking of those cities as one whole community of interest. Also, some of the larger university campuses, UW Oshkosh was brought up as wanting to stay in the same district as well.
Let me say, I'm not sure if you can hear me. I hope you can. But something that hasn't yet come up is sectors that share employment. So farmers or the dairy industry in Wisconsin, but other kinds of industrial commonalities are frequently brought up in COIs.
Any other comments before we next one? So I guess the next would be next steps for our COI committee. What do you guys, other than kind of reaching out to some of these groups and working with the lab as well, any other thoughts on our outreach?
I guess as a member of the outreach committee, I would just like to connect with somebody as part of the COI team to just know where like my responsibility might start and end for outreach related to COI stuff, and then where yours begins or ends, because it seems like there's a little bit of a merging there. I have no, what do you call it, like sense of like, can't think of the word I'm trying to think of. Like, I don't care if someone else does the work, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So if there's outreach things that I can help on and you need my support, I'm here. But if you'd rather do communities of interest outreach stuff all under the communities of interest group, by all means. I don't want to speak for Elizabeth, who's also part of the outreach group, but that's sort of a clarifying point.
And I'll also say, if I can just jump in quick, that this, I think, especially with the hearings, that the public testimony being wrapped up next week, that this will now become the work of all the commissioners to do this outreach and engagement as well, which more to come on what the fleshed out plan I think looks like, but just to kind of level set expectations, I think was an outcome of the COI conversation yesterday.
If it makes sense, if it makes sense for someone from the lab to join any of those COI subcommittee meetings, I would be happy to sit in on those.
I was just going to say, would it make sense, just to kind of piggyback off of what Maddie was bringing up, just kind of it being everyone's responsibility. I know a lot of the resources that we provided with some of the Latinx community as well as some of the Hmong community. Would it make sense, for individual commissioners to reach out, like within our districts, to try to tap some of those resources? I know some of the resources that we provided from the attorney that presented before are in Ben and I's district. Would it be more appropriate for us to do that and for the rest of the COI committee?
I don't know what you think about that, Melissa. I think probably at this point, I think maybe the more the better. One of the things I've been thinking about is, with being involved in the league for so long, that voter registration drives are fundamental to the work of lots of organizations, and they cover broad territory. That's what I was thinking, like to reach out to some of the harder to reach communities in my district. What I would do is start tapping those voter registration people and their connections, because it's kind of similar, it's voting rights. So it kind of falls into the same general area.
Yeah, I agree, Anne Marie. I think it doesn't hurt to reach out to as many folks as possible. And I actually think I had this thought a little bit as we were talking in the meeting yesterday, and kind of thinking about it after the fact, that and thinking about, the public testimony we've heard up to this point, those particular grassroots organizations are reaching a very specific type of person. And I think we've seen that too with the folks that are providing testimony. So these are people that are really already civically engaged, if that makes sense. And so I'm sort of wondering how we reach those folks that are maybe not tuned in to the Fair Maps Coalition, because certainly there's a lot of them who would still be very invested in the work that we're doing and be interested in contributing. So I think it's super important to use the resources those groups have and to engage with those people that are already engaged, for lack of a better way to put it. But I am worried about the folks that we are missing, the folks that are not, tuned into what League of Women Voters or Fair Maps Coalition are doing. I know that even from my local league chapter, that there's, we have a core group of super invested folks, but that's maybe 50 people out of the 50,000 that live in Sheboygan. So.
Thank you, Moon. Yeah.
Yeah, Melissa, go ahead, Tony.
I was just thinking out loud. Is there a plan to, like Howard was saying, or somebody, the farmers, the water people, the school district? Is there a literal plan to see what organizations farmers go to? What organizations do watershed people go to? Can we develop a sort of a standard reach out message to these people and say, hey, we're the People's Map Commission. We're drawing these fair maps. We're interested in your comments on your community of interest, something like that. Is there a plan for that?
Can I make a suggestion?
Yeah.
I think that most of those organizations, Tony, that you're talking about are very distinct. That is to say, they exist, they've been in place for a long time, they're well organized, and they're well known. Not to us necessarily, but they're not ad hoc. They're there for the long run, most of those. And I think there are organizations, probably mostly here in Madison, who have who collect the names of those organizations for their own reasons, not our reasons, but their reasons. So, for example, there's the one that comes to my mind always is the Counties Association, the Wisconsin Association of Counties. There's also the Wisconsin Association of School Boards. Okay, I would say that both of those organizations could give you pages and pages of the kinds of organizations that have been in place for quite a long time that you might discern, you might describe as communities of interest, like lake preservation districts. Within the school boards, in the world of school districts, there are lots of those kinds of organizations too. They're not just school board members; they're also administrators. They're also, they're parsed out. The groups that are interested in education are parsed out. The groups that are interested in the environment are parsed out. But there are also statewide organizations that sort of watch them, okay, that collect them because they are their constituency in a certain sense, okay. So I just wonder whether you are inventing the wheel here. That is to say, whether these lists aren't already made somewhere of the organizations that you're looking for, rather than making them yourselves. I wonder if here in Madison, particularly for obvious reasons, those lists aren't already made and not particularly closely held. They're not secret lists of some kind. They're just lists. Whether it would make some sense to to see if there's a strategy for reaching out to those kinds of statewide organizations that might share the lists with the commission. Frankly, my concern is that I think, listening to Jack, the end game strategy is going to be stronger if some of the organizations that believe they've been listened to by the commission are not the ones who, generally speaking, identify with liberal politics. Okay, those are the people who are going to show up. But if you want to reach out to broaden the base, you might, for example, look at some of the kinds of organizations that aren't, that are, let's say, natural resource oriented, that kind of thing. And I mean, I think you just know, and all of you know intuitively that those are not liberal organizations. Those are just organizations of people who live around a lake or a watershed. I think you might be interested in having those kinds of organizations interested in you, not just the ones that are already interested in you. Mm-hmm. So that is sort of getting those broader lists, looking at them with your own sort of political intuitions about who they are and whether they are just a roundup of the usual suspects or not, might be a good idea, rather than trying to do it from scratch, right? Trying to collect the names of all those organizations from scratch. I think if for no other reason, that it's just more efficient.
So if I can jump in again, sorry, I've been jumping in so much here tonight. I think to operationalize Howard's point, does it sound okay if each commissioner, because I think one thing to keep in mind, obviously, as we're thinking about these groups and the tools that we have in each of your communities, at the end of the day, you all were selected to represent your congressional districts and to bring the interests of your CDs to this group and make sure that they're represented. So I think, you all do have a good idea of who those groups might be in your CDs, the interests and communities of interest, to use the technical term, are, at least as a starting point. And so whether that is groups that are already involved in maps, whether it's groups that are involved in conservation efforts, whether it's whatever it is in your CD, if you can think about what that list is, and if you want to send me that list, so if we can get a list, however, it might be 3 from some CDs, it might be 10 from others, send me that list. We can work on the actual turning out a product then for you all to do the outreach to those groups, but we'll just then have a kind of idea and also be able to see who we're missing too, if that is helpful, and the organization and implementation side of making this all happen. So we're not just doing the one-offs, because the one-offs are great, but we want it to be like a concerted effort too, and we can identify where the gaps are, and then even actually see the gaps when we start seeing those maps too, that Women's Group will produce and do multiple iterations of and things like that. Does that sound right to folks?
That seems very reasonable.
Yeah.
So I'll go for it, Amber.
I was just going to say to Howard's point, sorry, Howard's saying that, that sounds good, Maddie, 100%. But in addition to that, there might be lists that already exists that we don't have to collect and establish, to Howard's point. So I don't know.
Yeah, sorry, Polly and I have been talking.
Just jump in for real quick. I think if we could focus on, if possible, the themes of kinds of groups of people that you're interested in, then we can go out and find those lists, because there are lists of people who have purple hair with the first name Scott, right? I guarantee you there's a list somewhere out there of that. So if the commissioners can all coalesce around the kinds of themed communities of interest, we can all work together to find those lists. So if it's, I'll just say ag is a big one. So there's ag industries, there's ag researchers. We can go in a lot of different directions that we can help get you the lists and get those out there. But I just think the first step is to really define who we want to do outreach for generally about the People's Maps work, and then who do we need to do research or outreach to specifically for communities of interest, because I think we're conflating those.
And Molly, do you also mean like, do you mean something as vague as like maybe for Jason Bissonette in the 7th, like the logging community or something like that, you know, like, which won't obviously apply to the 4th, though they use wood there, you know?
But yes, because the logging community is also an industry, but it's also a natural resource. And so there's going to be multiple communication groups that we could reach into the state agencies and others to get. So I think send things as generic as that of like logging community. That is a good one. And then we can all work together to find the list. And if we don't have the list, that we can't find the list, then we can work with all of you guys to figure it out. I think really defining communities of interest that you're interested in getting information to, and then generally who you want to make sure we're communicating about people's maps work. Those two things that we need to make sure we're sort of separating and keeping clear, and then we can go from there.
Got it. So Maddie's original point was to identify the specific communities of interest we're interested in finding lists for versus the organizations. Got it. Okay.
I think, and I don't want to speak for Maddie, I think it would be helpful if you say, you know, purple haired Scots are a big deal in my district. And also I have a listserv for that. Like, I think naming the communities of interest or the groups you want to talk to, noting that if it's a group that you want to specifically talk to about communities of interest versus just general awareness, I think those two are important. And then if you already have a connection to that group, that would be the sort of third thing to note when you're sending things to Maddie.
Can I ask a question? I just heard a reference to this other state agencies. So I don't know what the protocols are, but I would guess that at the Department of Natural Resources and at the Department of Agriculture and at whatever now is called the Department of Commerce, over the years that is a sort of changing identity, that I'm sorry, okay, that they're going to know who pays attention to them. Okay, so at the Natural Resources Department, they're going to know who are the lake districts and the river districts and that kind of thing. The Department of Agriculture is going to know who's making cheese or who's worried about. I mean, I know, for example, I'm so sorry about this noise. There's nothing I can do about it. They're going to know that there are areas of the state that identify about because of issues of groundwater, things like that. I mean, they do have sort of constituent groups that make their case to them that appear at rulemaking procedures, for example. I don't know if you have access to the department in that way that they will give that up to you, but I'm sure that they're there.
And so again, I would just note, and I don't want to speak on behalf of all the agencies, I think if you guys are able to narrow your scope, I think that would be helpful. So I just think about my colleagues at the DNR. If you ask the person who answers the phone, they might identify a different kind of group that they think is important and their constituents are really loud versus a different person who answers the phone, because some are working on wolves, some are working on timber, and I think really if you narrowed your focus, that would help us when we're talking to the agencies.
So from what I'm getting from that, it seems like, it may be good to identify, interested communities, as Maddie has put in each one of our districts, and so that can be a homework assignment if it's helpful for the both for Maddie and for Molly to kind of reach out to the folks, as well as the COI committee. That way we can kind of glean some communities that we're not tapping into, and I'm sure that that's something that we all can do. I think we lost some folks, but I see some nods. So perfect. Any other thoughts you guys had from the COI committee? All set. Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Tony.
No, I don't have anything.
Okay, got it. So I guess we can go ahead and move towards our line drawers committee as well. If you guys have any updates on that. I have a document that was sent out. I don't know if you guys got this. I'm sure everyone got it, but if you haven't had time to review, it should be a reiteration with some corrections as well. But it's the PMC address criteria for drawing districts that Anne-Marie and had come up with based on our last meeting. I know Tony and Susan had provided some reviews as well, but line draws committee, feel free.
Well, I'll start, Anne-Marie. I don't think we have too much new to say. I think Anne-Marie did a very good job sort of coalescing the criteria and trying to put it into words that the public can consume. But I don't think it's anything we have to reach consensus on tonight. We agreed that we were going to have the last hearing and get the input from that district before we sort of, finalized even the preliminary criteria. So I would just say everybody should try to read what Anne-Marie put out in the next couple of weeks. That would be my input.
Yeah, I just second that, Tony. If you can send in your comments, and then at least by the end of that last hearing, we will have a document ready to go. The intent is to take that and post it on our website under our records, just to document some of the decisions we're making along the way. And also there's an ask in the bottom of that anybody that wants to provide comments on those criteria should do so. And we can put a timeline, a date on that, just to get people to comment on a timely basis.
Yeah, and I like the fact that the one that we have, at least as a prelim, is May 31st, trying to get to that timeline as well. So that I think that's our goal to work towards that. And I agree to kind of give some, give people a timeline, a good cutoff to go for. So.
Yeah, and I think Moon, as we get into, both Moon and Liz had to get off, but I think by later this month or into April, we'll probably start seeing some preliminary maps based on our preliminary criteria. So that'll be interesting.
Anything else from the line drawers? No. Okay. Thanks, guys. So we kind of went into COI outreach. Ben, do you guys have anything? Ben and Elizabeth, sorry.
Yeah, well, we met with Molly. The three of us met. I think the biggest news, in case anyone didn't see it for whatever reason, is that we have a Twitter now. I think as we move into, as Maddie said there earlier, sort of maybe the outreach committee sort of just kind of blurs into the rest of the kind of disbands in a way, because a lot of our work will just become outreach across the board. But in terms of Twitter stuff, by all means, everyone on the commission, if you have feedback or ideas, or you feel strongly about wanting to be a part of posting tweets, Molly and I Molly is the only one who's posted anything as far as my knowledge goes. And the one thing from the last commission hearing is we were sort of on the fence about, we were for sure sharing experts and what they were saying and highlighting some of the takeaways from the experts, but we were sort of on the fence about whether or not to highlight public testimony and specifically name the public, because we don't really explicitly ask them for permission. And so, Molly, I don't know if we ever came to a conclusion there. The last CD hearing, we didn't name any members of the public or share any of their photos or anything. But that's the only thing that comes to mind related to Twitter for me.
We should ask, hey, Jack, I failed to ask you before. For the individuals who testify during the hearings, do they need to sign some sort of media release or anything like that?
I think the answer is no to that, but let me get back to you. I mean, we broadcast the hearings, but.
And we do tell them that it is being recorded and broadcast.
Yes, but I think it's fair to think about it a little bit before we.
Okay.
Yeah, I will look into what we think.
And then Tony, the Twitter handle is WI People's Maps. Is that correct, Molly?
Yep.
Actually, it's funny, I gave up social media for Lent, and so I only went on Twitter for the commission. So hopefully
I'll get you signed on to it, and then you're not doing anything?
I know. I'm sorry.
That's dedication. That's dedication. There's the outreach committee chair. Yeah, that's awesome.
I know it was poor timing. I will be on it if we need it. If there's a specific plan, Molly and I have to sort of connect in terms of like an outreach plan using the Twitter, but we were live and posting, and I retweeted a bunch. And so I don't know what we're at in terms of followers.
68, it looks like. We're going to go from 68 to 1,000 as soon as Ben finishes.
So that's
after Lent.
That's an infinite percent increase compared to where we started with 0.
And it has been steadily rising. I check every day. So.
Wait, we still the only group you follow, Jack? Is that?
Yeah.
Oh,
no, I'm sorry. I started following a bunch of journalists that I used to just type in there. I used to like the grandpa way to do Twitter is to search for, Patrick Marley Twitter.
For a moment,
Patrick's watching this. Now he knows I check his Twitter.
For a moment, we were so important that Jack only followed one Twitter account, and it was ours. So that was a special moment.
I'm slowly being dragged back into social media, and I'll be following thousands in no time. So you guys are my first. So, well, we appreciate all the followers. It is our only social media account, and likely, given just some of the restrictions and the way communication needs to happen, likely our only. So we've thought about ways, and we will continue to leverage our connection with the Fair Maps Coalition and like just having them spread the word, of course. But by all means, I think that's a really good source of just like real-time updated information for constituents. Molly or Elizabeth, anything else to say about Twitter? Okay, and then the one other thing the major thing that comes to mind from our last outreach subcommittee meeting was like, we're planning on following the final congressional hearing to share like a summary of all of the hearings. Molly's taken the lead on that. Appreciate you, Molly, as always. Including like, how many public comments or hours of testimony we haven't officially decided. So if there are summary data points you want to be sure that we highlight, now would be a good time to bring those up. Otherwise, our subcommittee will think of those. And we'll highlight those maybe via, I don't know, Molly, if you're thinking just Twitter, and then share with some.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can do a media release, and I think we should have whoever is comfortable, but definitely a chair for it. I'm going to volunteer you to go on some sort of media tour with some of those data points. I think would be good. I also downloaded all of the recorded hearings, and we'll try, if I have time, to make some sort of like culmination video of all the things that happened and occurred, so that can get packaged up too. So we'll put together a package of things and then give it to you all, and then send it to the media, but also then our grassroots partners.
That's great. And then I think I'm kind of on the fence. The other things we talked about were really related to what we were talking about earlier regarding communities of interest, which is like, once we have, like, what is our plan when it comes to getting people to engage in the map making process and establishing communities of interest? And then also somewhat related, like highlighting the criteria, but I don't think we need to, I think that sort of, if that's going to be on the website and whatnot, that should be fine once we establish what our working criteria will be. And then.
Can I just pop in on that?
Yeah, go ahead.
We did discuss how the criteria rollout will be important in conjunction with the communities of interest, because the community of interests are so weighted heavily within your criteria. We can kind of push it all out in one piece as an educational piece to say, here's the criteria, and this is why the communities of interest are so important, and thus we want you submitting communities of interest documents. So just wanted to highlight that too.
Yeah. And so I think the only other random thing that's coming to mind that came up would be like, we had talked briefly about commissioners getting connected with local media around letters to the editor, stuff like that. I don't think we actually decided, like, we didn't come up with a specific plan for that. I had the neighborhood news service in Milwaukee reach out to me, and so I'm writing a letter to the editor that's due tomorrow for them. And so I think it's fair to be like, if you have a really hyper local journalistic institution that you want to reach out to and talk about our work, especially through the lens of we finished all these congressional hearings, we learned a ton. We're now asking for maps. Like all of that stuff could be really useful in an op-ed just to get awareness out there. I don't want to assign anyone any responsibilities on that, but that's another thing we discussed.
And we shouldn't have to decide this today, but is there an interest from the commission of writing sort of a joint op-ed that we would farm out to all the statewide media outlets? And I don't think you have to decide today. I think we should think about that, but also, and then where do we fit it within your work? But I think that that's something to consider as one as a whole.
I think that makes sense. So I'm just going to put my vote in there for yes.
And I'm not sure when it makes the most amount of sense. Does it go when you're making the maps, or does it go at this point? I think you want to sort of save that tool for when it's really going to be the most important and impactful, but I'm just throwing that out there as something to think about.
Yeah, no, I agree with Ben. I think it makes total sense, especially to kind of get that demographic of people who aren't necessarily tapped into what we're doing. It may be better to have a joint one in order to kind of make sure that we're standard amongst the message that's getting out. It may be something to touch upon as we get closer to, which we get past our formal hearings. So.
Yeah, and it doesn't sound like anyone's objecting. So based on like our norms here, that sounds like something we can kind of plan on doing.
Absolutely.
In terms of timing, the two things I would just say, it would make sense to either for timing to maximize outreach when we're looking for the most participation, either for map drawing or identifying communities of interest or what have you, or closer to when, we're actually getting to the redistricting, the redrawing, and the legislator and stuff like that, past like closer to census data and all that, so that public awareness is high around the work that we have concluded. So maybe both, I don't know, but that's what I would say.
Yeah, we can talk about ways to do both. I think there's ways to split it up amongst commission members or just chair forward versus the whole commission. So there's ways to do that. I think hitting it twice makes sense.
Great.
There are some referenda in April 6th. So whatever we can put out generally, Molly, would be useful. I've had trouble up here in Appleton. I can't get the Post Crescent interested at all. But I think generally across the state, that's not the experience. So it would be useful to get something out before April 6th, like what we've learned and things like that.
Is someone keeping track, and I mean someone being maybe not you guys, but maybe of all the different referenda in the different areas so that we could target better, or is it?
Oh yeah, we can get that easily. Anne Marie and I can email Carlene Beecham tomorrow.
Oh yeah, I can bug Carlene too. Okay.
What?
I said I can bug her too. I can bug her too.
I'll let you.
Okay, sounds good. But that's a good point too about the referenda. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think there's maybe like 6 counties or something like that have them on for April 6th. A couple of them are next door to my county here.
Yeah, those would be excellent to target. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's all we have. Elizabeth, anything else? No, okay. And I just want to reemphasize what I said earlier. I think our transparency is directly connected to the public awareness, because the public will feel like we're not being transparent if they're not aware of it. So the more they're aware the public is, the better. And so as much as you can do to just, even if it's something we don't explicitly agree on, spread the word, talk to friends, family. I know all of you are already doing it like I am, but it's, I would hate for all of our work to just go unnoticed. Of course it's not, people are paying attention, but to what Melissa said earlier, let's try to make sure that it's not just those who are hyper civically engaged. So appreciate everyone.
Absolutely, thanks, Ben. Project management, anything on the updates?
No, just what we've already discussed.
Yeah. And I got nothing from lessons learned. Ruben and I talked earlier, but kind of along the lines of what we have already discussed, and nothing from expert selection. Does anyone have anything else to bring up this time? All right.
I've got one quick thing, Chris. I just, as a point of awareness, I found that communications link from the People's Map Commission, where you contact a particular commissioner, it wasn't coming to my email. And thanks to Maddie, we're working on that. But somebody in my district emailed my personal address. Finally, he got a hold of that, and he said, "I just want you to know I sent you something, and it didn't come through." So we're testing it. So if you have never, has anyone gotten any emails from constituents or anything? You can maybe just give yourself a little test, see if it's coming through to you.
Yeah,
And then let me know. We thought we had resolved it because it worked. Seems like it's working for some emails and maybe not others. Not sure. So let me know, and we can work with our website team to get that resolved.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks.
Tony, go for it.
Just a quick question for Jack. Any further feedback on the possibility of getting University of Wisconsin or other students involved to help us?
No, not yet, and I apologize for not having progress there, but I'll continue to do that or to look into that. I do want to say, and I meant to say it when Moon was here actually, that it's very likely that this week her contract will be finalized with state procurement. There's a waiver process to do a non-competitive bidding. She fits all the criteria for her group. I'm sorry, not Moon personally. But no, I had emailed about that, Tony, to the Applied Population Lab and then never followed up, and I apologize for that. So I'll make that my mission before our next meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. Maddie, just as a follow-up, can we send out an email to all the commissioners just about the homework project to kind of reach out to interested communities, especially for the commissioners that aren't here? That way it doesn't fall by the wayside as well. So.
Yeah, I'll do that, and I'll include deadlines, and I'll also include our notes too from this meeting.
Awesome. Thanks, Maddie. I guess anything else that you guys have at this point? No? All right. Oh, I see Susan coming on. Of course. Hi, Susan.
Hi, everyone.
Hey.
Sorry about that.
No worries, no worries. We're actually, we were going to close out. Do you have anything? So just as a heads up, I just got to finish talking to Maddie. She's going to send out an email just with some of the things that we discussed here today. One thing that we talked about was touching base with some communities of interest, interested communities within our districts to kind of reach out and see if we can get some interaction between some of our events that were coming up, and as well as trying to tap into those resources too. But otherwise, did you have anything? I know that we kind of talked via email very quickly, but anything to bring
No,
up?
I'm good. Thank you. Sorry about that.
No worries, no worries, no worries. All right, guys. Well, thanks for coming, but no worries, guys. Thank you all. I appreciate it.